All right, so for the next 2 weeks, actually, we are going to be working on our character animation. So we are returning to the characters that we made at the midterms. So if you go onto Blackboard, you'll be able to see what the exact due date is, points possible, all that. But I also spell out, because it's been a little while since we worked on this, I spell out the different things you may or may not have to do for your character. And if you're wanting to remember how to do parenting and replacements, things like that, look through the announcements. We have, all the old videos that go over these things. But one of the reasons this is a little less specific than usual is that you all have different characters and you all have different places that you landed on those characters in terms of what needs to be done. So, for example, many of you will need to parent layers together, but not everyone. It depends on what you're doing. So, some of you will have like hinged characters where there's lots of parenting, and some of you may not. Right? Some of you may have floating things. So I can't tell you, yes, you have to parent things, but at this point, you should know if you have to or not. Same for replacement parts. Some of you may have replacement expressions that you want to have, different eyes or something like that, right? Those are things you'll have to consider. Now, in bold right here are a few things that, yeah, you're pretty much going to have to do that. It's pretty universal. For example, separating pieces onto separate layers. There is no kind of animation I can think of in this program where you keep, well, no, that's a lie. If you use joints, but don't use joints, you need separate layers for everything. And in case you're wanting to remember, if you've already put things into movie clips, so these are, I can open up my properties, I click on them, they all say they're movie clips. If you've already converted things to movie clips and you don't have them on separate layers, you can drag, select, right click, distribute to layers. Most of you already have things as movie clips, I'm sorry, most of you already have everything on separate layers because that's how you made the character. So this is a good example of a character that none of these are movie clips yet, but all the layers are done. Now, if I was working on this for real, I would probably rename a few of these layers because the layer names are a little bit long, right? So for most of you, you're going to have your separate layers, but you're not going to have things turned to symbols yet. And that's the other thing you're going to need to do. Unless something is going to be a shape tween, and that is very, very rare. Everything needs to be a movie clip. So I need to select the right foot, which I can select by clicking here on the layer. And then I check and I make sure that's the only thing that's selected. And I say FA and I turn it into, the foot. Um, so on and so forth. Now, as you're converting things to movie clips, please make sure that you are, let's go to a different, there we go. You're labeling them properly. So your library should show a bunch of things that are actually properly labeled and we know what they are. This has like 4 different things in it. There's one that's called this, but that's okay. Most of them say left hand, left leg, ponytail, right leg, sword, all that stuff. That head, arms. That's what we're looking for. What we're looking for is that whenever you click on stuff, it says it's a movie clip. At least this isn't converted yet. So this is actually very representative of where you all are at. Some people might have everything converted to movie clips. Some people might have some things are converted. This isn't. And some people might not have anything converted to movie clips yet. So you all have a little bit of different amounts of work to do to get to animation. The last thing I wanna shine a really giant, bright, epic spotlight on is something that often gets forgotten. So, placing pieces in separate layers, converting pieces to movie clips, we talk about it all the time. A lot of you made it part of the process for designing your character. Um, and then we get to animating, and you're like, okay, keyframes and tweens and everything. There's something that has to happen in between those two things before you keyframe, before a single solitary frame goes beyond frame 1 on this project. You need to change where the pivot points are for your movie clips. 90% of what you're animating is going to involve a rotation at some point. And we have to remember that when something defaults, like by default, the pivot point here goes to the middle of the object. We need it to go where it's actually going to rotate, because if we don't change, if we leave it there, your arm rotates from here. That doesn't help you at all. So I need to move it here, right? And then test that out and see if I like how that works. And I actually made it a little bit wibbly wobbly. So I gotta take a closer look, not be so lazy. There we go. Yeah, I still gotta figure it out. But I want it to be in the center of that circle, and I would do the same thing here. If you have, some characters, it will be very obvious where they go, right? Some characters, it may not be as obvious. So the hip joint on this one, it's kind of under here. So you move the pivot point, and you kind of test it. Oh, is that where I want it? Oh, maybe I want to change this. Hit undo to bring the leg back to where it's supposed to be, and then move that. Now, keep in mind, I have one here that isn't converted. Pivot points don't save unless it's on a movie clip, right? So I select these two things, I move the pivot point, oh, it's great, and then I go back, and pivot point's over here. Things have to be a movie clip in order for it to remember. Now I click off, click back on, now it works. All right, so pivot point, want to make sure we're remembering that. I also want to show you what happens if you don't. So we're gonna undo, and let's see, it's the lower arm, so I'm gonna put a keyframe out to here, and I'm gonna rotate it, and I'm going, oh, whoops, and then I'm gonna move the anchor point over here, and then rotate it, and then tween it. Now some of you already know what happened. I had a second keyframe here already, and then I moved the pivot point. Well, this first keyframe here, let me make everything else invisible. The pivot point's still over here. As soon as you make a second keyframe, apropos of nothing else, ignoring the tween, ignoring everything else, as soon as you have a second keyframe, you have two different sets of settings for your movie clip. Any setting that you change is now going to be registered as different from here to here, because that's what the point of a keyframe is. And what's going to happen is, not only is this floating weird because it's trying to what's the word I'm looking? It's trying to put a square peg in a round hole, right? It's trying to say, okay, if the pivot point is also moving, we're going to animate this, but it can't quite do that. And it does this. So like a frame beforehand, it'll be as if the anchor point was still here, and then whoop. So we don't want that. And trying to fix that, let me tell you, after the fact, like going back here and going, oh, I'm going to put it in the middle here. No. If you do something like this, in all honesty, the easiest way to deal with it is to get rid of the classic tween and get rid of all those frames and go back to the beginning and move this. I promise you the chances of it being better the other way, of trying to fix it after the fact, so difficult. And then we move this, and now it should work properly. Oh, now it'll work properly now that there's a tween. All right, another thing that we have to make sure we're remembering is if for some reason you miss something. It happens to the best of us. Here we go. So I turn this into a movie clip. Or no, I'm sorry. I turn everything else into a movie clip. I forget this one thing, right? I forget this one little item, which is technically a drawing object. And then I go to, move it. And I right click and I say classic tween, and it gives me this error message, this infamous error message. Do you want us to convert it for you? No. No, no, no. Don't click this don't show again, please. Put it to cancel. And then get rid of your frames. Go back to square one and turn this into a movie clip first. My reason for saying that is because if you try to force this, what technically happens is, let me see here. I click on this, it says here we go. It's a type of symbol called a graphic, and it's named tween 1. And then I go over here, and it's a type of symbol called a graphic named tween 2. It has created two different symbols, one where the thing is tilted up and one where the thing is tilted down. Well, what if you need to change the color of this? What if you need to change the shape of this? What if you need to change any one of 100 things that you need to go into the symbol to change? Well, it's not going to change it across the symbol because they are two different symbols. So just like with the pivot point that you forgot to move, sometimes it's best to just go back to square one, and start from there. And that sucks. But it's better than broken animation because you haven't dealt with it yet, but broken animation is very, very hard to change. All right, let's see. Let's go back to the assignment. So once you are done prepping things, that is a good time to show me your stuff. Within the first week, you definitely want to have even some of the animation done. Like it shouldn't take you a full week to set it up and then a full week to animate. It should be to set up is a little bit quicker, which means sending me your work, before our next class, right? So email it to me, email me the FLA file, send me what you have. That is a very good check-in moment because I can take a look at things and kind of see like what's missing, what is there, what's working, just kind of give you like a yep, this'll do all right. I can't guarantee I catch everything, but if there's like a major issue, then entire limbs that aren't converted, I'll be able to help you through that. All right, so I recommend highly that once you get your character set up and everything ready to go, send me an email with the file and then, a little bit of like, I'm going to have them walk or I'm going to have them do this, just so I know what you're trying to animate. Because if they don't need to move their left arm, then I know that they don't need to have the left arm set up. I don't know why that would be the case. But once you get it set up, then you want to do some animation. And, within the 2 weeks, the end of the first week, you want to have some animation in, whether it's just the first tiny part is done or you've got like a general outline, whatever it is, you want to have started some things so that you could see what breaks and then ask me questions. And I'm going to show in another video some examples of what students have done, but short and simple. We do not have a month and a half, an entire studio to animate this. So this is meant to be pretty simple, but not too simple. It's when a character swings a sword, don't just karate chop the one hand. Like there's other things that are moving. Characters blink or their faces make expressions. There's a lot of things you can do with the character to make it not too simple, but also don't plan a 2-minute movie with a plot and a subplot and a beginning, middle, end, with just it's wow, we want manageable and well executed, right? So I'd rather something that's well executed and a little bit simpler than shooting for the moon and it all broke, because we want something that when you're done, you could say, oh, I made this thing. All right, so submit that here when you're done FLA and Swift file, please.